I'm Pastor Kelvin Page, pastor of the Westmore Church of God, and I am honored today to sit with Dr. Terry Cross, who is not only a wonderful theologian who has put years of study into his practice and into his teaching, and it's just a wonderful thing to be able to sit with him. But we go beyond just a matter of our careers interfacing, so to speak, as a pastor in Cleveland and you being a professor at the university. We also go to the same church. I have the wonderful opportunity to pastor Terry and his wonderful wife Linda, and beyond that, we were raised, what, 10, 15, maybe 15 miles, 20 miles, I guess at the most, away from each other, and our families so interface. We won't bore the listeners with all of this, but Terry's, Dr. Cross's grandfather led my grandfather, John Page, to the Lord. And I shall forever be indebted to a man named Archie Cross for that, because I have a great feeling it has a lot to do with my calling and who I am today because of that wonderful thing.
Well, I grew up hearing all about your family. So, and I remember those times when we had what used to be called district fellowship meetings.
Yes, yes.
We'd be meeting in everybody's church.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
Those are kind of lost, but boy, they did something special for the church in the area. Well, we're wanting to talk about Pentecost, and I had a chance to listen to some video work you had done earlier, and I believe that's loaded up and is available for people to listen to. But wow, what great teaching! And we were asked to just kind of dialogue here a little bit about some of the, as we approach Pentecost Sunday, to dialogue a little bit about some of the historical roots that are important. And then ultimately we want to get to why Pentecost is so necessary as far as its impact on the church today. What are those ramifications and what are the practical application issues that would be involved with the church today? And so we were talking a little bit just prior to coming on camera about the relationship of Pentecost to the feast, not just the Feast of Pentecost, but to the feast. And I was inquiring of you about the idea of the Feast of the Passover began an agricultural process. There's an agricultural journey, seasons make agriculture work. So we have the seed planting time, and we have the Feast of the Passover, and of course Jesus was our seed that was planted in the ground, and wow, what a harvest has come out of that original seed going in the ground. And then we have the Feast of Pentecost, which he described as looking forward to the harvest. We talked about just a little bit off camera about the ramifications of the sickle and the idea of the harvest time coming, and so a celebration was there as the first fruits begin to be evidenced on the vine.
Right.
And then the relationship of the third feast we were talking about was the Feast of the Tabernacle and the gathering places for the harvest. And so it's just ingenious the way God so wonderfully and symbolically tied all that together.
Part of that maybe that we can speak about to pastors. I know I said in another video that there's a reticence on many of our parts to engage in some kind of rhythm or ritual of church life. But what I see in the feast in the Old Testament are times of great celebration.
Yes.
And God knew that there needed to be rhythm to our lives.
Yes.
So this is why the days are named, for example.
Yes.
There's a Sabbath on Sunday. There's a rationale for God's purpose of naming and requiring certain things on these days. And the same thing went through for the year.
Yeah.
Now for the people in Israel, it sure made sense. They were an agricultural people, so it would make sense to connect the feast day to times of specific agricultural things. And if your livelihood depends on what you grow, you're going to want God's blessings and celebrate when the harvest comes in.
Yes, and there's almost, as you said, this rhythm. Maybe we could equate it, it's probably a poor parallel, but the idea of how we look forward to the holidays. You have Thanksgiving, and then you have Christmas, and I remember as a kid, and even today, I mean, you just look forward to the New Year's, and then there's this rhythm and this sense of building these celebrations, and wow, God's people knew how to celebrate, and I think that God was obviously behind all of that. Pentecost has some tremendous practical implications for the church. And you've done a powerful job of laying out some of the historical pieces and foundation of the origin and the ramifications of it. But as we come to today, Pentecost, we believe, is still alive. And we can learn so much from these feasts. I think we miss something when we don't understand not only the rhythm piece and God's design for mankind to celebrate, but the parallels and how the feast and the ramifications and parallels that come out of those feasts, how they have such relevance to us today. And as we hone in on Pentecost, tying that to the Feast of Pentecost, as we looked at its origin, there are great ramifications that are there for the church today when we gather for worship, the way we function, our views of the church. And I'd like us just for a moment to talk about some of those. Would you have any of those things that were standing out in your mind?
Well, it seems in Acts chapter 2, we have a continental divide from what has come up to that point in Scripture and what comes after. I mean, you cannot imagine Acts 10, Acts 19, Acts 15. You can't imagine Paul's missionary journeys without something like this having creating the New Testament church the way it did.
Yes.
So there's a sense in which something really important happened on that day.
Yes.
So 50 days after the Passover, the crucifixion, the disciples are given one major thing. They're sitting, waiting together. Jesus has ascended 10 days earlier. They're waiting for the promise of the Spirit, promise of the Father. And the purpose of this, Jesus has already told them, is to be witnesses in Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the earth. Mm-hmm. So if what we see happening on the day of Pentecost is this incredible demonstration of what happens when the Holy Spirit enters the human being.
Oh, it's powerful.
And it just spills out into the world.
Yes.
So you can't hold. I once heard a Welsh theologian say, "It's impossible to hold in the love of God."
Yes.
It's logically impossible, he said. And it's true. Yeah. It just bursts forth.
And its relationship to the harvest. How, both in its origin and in Deuteronomy 16, you see real clear parallels with the Feast of Pentecost and the origin of in the harvest, right, and the way it's celebrated. And it's, we talk so much about evidence, and I think we should. I think somehow, and you may disagree with me, but I think sometimes we have a theological backlash where we intend to, we've had to defend things like tongues,
sure,
and we have found it to be such a reality, and we're passionate about that, and the gifts of the Spirit. But perhaps we've learned really well how to defend that over the years, and we've sometimes missed the big picture as it relates to the many other evidences that are involved.
I guess I would like to shy away from the word evidence.
Okay.
Not among Church of God folk when I'm talking about that, but the word evidence is not there in the second chapter. But what is there are signs.
Yes.
And for me, in the New Testament, biblical signs are important. Yes. For example, John says, these things have been written so that you may believe. These signs are written there. And then Mark says signs will follow believers. There's evidence in some sense, but for me it's a pointer.
Good.
God is present.
I like that.
And that comes out in what later in the chapter is called, we would call prophesying.
Yes.
So it isn't just tongues that occur there, although I think we have reasons for thinking why that needs to be attached to what we would call baptism in the Spirit. That's an initial sign. But there's something, sometimes we've become so glossocentric, so focused on tongues that we miss what's happening in the big picture.
Yes.
So this is one of those amazing signs that God is present.
Yes.
And it's like what happens when prophecy occurs in 1 Corinthians 14. Paul says, the sinner in your midst will fall on his knees and say, God is here.
Yes, yes.
Surely, because you just spoke the words that were in my heart.
Yes.
What you revealed this.
Yes. Yes. Oh, that's rich. And when we talk, let's use the language of signs. When we talk about signs, one of the things as a pastor I'm looking for when I'm engaging or seeking to look at the impact of Pentecost on my local congregation, that God has placed me to in a position to pastor, to lead, is our passion for souls. It seems to be so directly connected. Before Acts 2, we see a lack of courage and boldness. After Acts 2, we see such boldness and even people willing to put their lives on the line. And that is a real need I think we have today. In a culture, we need wisdom as to how to exercise that boldness, how to know when to be still, and how to know when to speak, and know when to put it on the line. And I just believe the Spirit leads us in that.
I think that's the critical element.
Yeah.
Part of what you see in Acts 2 is there's not a lot of rational control going on here by the disciples. Now, someone who likes to have rational control, this becomes a problem. But you know, I think it's what it means to be a follower of Christ anyway, because not a whole lot that occurs is coming from my human reason. It's coming from something else.
Yeah.
And I think it's the Spirit. So they're out there talking in a language they don't know, which must have been an amazing thing for them to hear.
It's organized chaos.
It is. It is. And what they are speaking are the wonderful works of God.
Yes. Yes.
So here's how I take that. I have less a desire, the older I get, I have a less a desire to see evangelism as something that's laid on people as, well, you have to do this.
Right.
And much more as something that's spontaneous. It just, in fact, it reminds me, Jesus was at a feast when he said this. It reminds me of Jesus' words. Out of your innermost belly will flow rivers of living water. And it just, you cannot stop that Spirit from moving. What I wonder if is happening in our churches today is that we've taught people a rational way of dealing with this instead of focusing on what can you do to be the fire hose of the Spirit, so that when the Spirit is ready to witness to them and share with them, this is the Jesus that has transformed me, that will make a difference. It's one other thing in that way. I was trained to, in a modernist setting, to say, okay, I have a defense for an argument for the existence of God, I have an argument for this, an argument for this. So I had all these rationalistic responses. In the world we live, which is much more postmodern, there's some good and bad that comes with that. People listen to your story.
Yes.
So I think there's a place here for every human being, not just to get to
come and be filled.
Just be filled and let the story then spill out.
Oh, and that's where the harvest ramifications come.
I think that's
because when that takes place, as that is led by the Spirit, and our stories full of life and transformation and hope begin to spill out, then the Lord is able to take us as His messengers and marvelously bringing the harvest. And there's so many signs with, as a pastor, I look for that, hope for and believe God for this life, this boldness, organized chaos, as I labeled what you were saying earlier. It might not be the best term, but But also I think there's some other signs in Acts 2 that we should be looking for in our churches that I think are directly tied and have Pentecostal ramifications. One would be the issue of racism.
Yeah.
I think there's several isms that are they're there. I mean, you read Acts 2 and they're there. You have people from all different nations.
Yeah. At least 14 are listed there.
So there's this unifying agent, this unifying sign, this sense of coming together regardless.
And notice that the languages they spoke were different, but the message was the same.
Oh, that's good.
Because they all were speaking the wondrous praises of God. The Spirit gives that uniform message through different ways of doing it.
Yes.
So if racism is part of the church, even that kind of just under the surface racism, I can't imagine that any church that is like that will be ready for the explosion of non-racism, of inclusion in the heavens, where every tribe, nation, and kindred will dwell.
So you have the sign of racism being, in God's intentions, eliminated. You have the issue of generationalism. You have, it's almost as if you see this intentional proclamation or this intentional wording, whatever it is, your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Not just the fathers, but your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. And in this day in which there seems to be such divisions in churches over generational issues such as music and ministry methods and all those kinds of things, I think Acts 2 teaches us that we have to make room for one another.
That's right.
We have to make room for the sons and daughters to speak and to...
Do you think that when you and I were younger, there tended to be more opportunity of senior pastors to make room for younger folk who were needing to have their gifts exercised? I tend to remember, I look back at it now and I'm thinking, why would they ever have given their pulpit to a 20-year-old?
I thought the same thing. Were they crazy?
Yeah.
They did, didn't they?
This was something, I think, that marked Pentecostalism in a way that's very different from a number of other churches. You had to go get an education somewhere and come back when you're 25, and then you start at a certain level, and then we'll let you into the pulpit. The belief of Pentecost was God's Spirit can speak to a 12-year-old.
And even be willing to take risks.
And that risk is, I think, it's... But it wasn't just the pastor. The congregation were supportive of that too.
Yes.
So I think there's something in the mentality of the Spirit that the one way to train any minister is to get them in the plow and go.
Yes. And I think that's such a sign of the impact of Pentecost when a life-giving church has that kind of thing naturally going on.
Yes.
Because of the work of the Spirit. Sometimes I think we look for the wrong things with the work of the Spirit. We don't see the Spirit working in those things, and yet Acts 2 makes it very clear that is signs and evidences of the Spirit working. We have the ramifications of the harvest. We have racism being addressed in a unique way through the work of the Spirit. We have generationalism, but we also have gender.
Yes.
We see that the daughters are going to be empowered to prophesy.
Yes.
And that's powerful.
Extraordinary.
Especially in the culture of that day.
Yes. Oh, and I mean, if you look after Deborah, I don't know, I'm not an Old Testament focused scholar, but I can't recall a prophetess until you perhaps hear Anna in the New Testament.
Wow.
It's quiet. So to have Joel in the middle of all that, prophesying sons and daughters, that should be a word to us, yes. And so that generational difference is extinct before God, and so is, at the cross we are on level ground.
Yes. There's such an underpinning of unity, because in all of this, he said, come and, they came together in one mind, one accord. But then the unity of mission to share the message of Jesus Christ so the world would be saved, so that whosoever could come. The unity of mission is evidenced next to the unity of races, the unity of gender, the unity of generations. There's such, all of it is such a unifying.
And I would throw one more ism in there for us. God seems to be doing away with individualism. So that while the effect was on each individual, it was done so as the body. This is a group of people that is affecting the world around them. I think in today's age, this is really important because the 20 to 30-year-olds are very frequently scratching their heads about the church. They would rather just kind of not be a part of an institution or an organizational group. And I think the local church is critical in finding some way to get us out into the body of Christ and into the world, that we do this together. In a real sense, in the house of God, we figure out what this means and then we move out together. I think that's how the Spirit lands. So individualism is replaced with community.
And who wouldn't want the workings of the Spirit when you consider the signs that he brings of his being present and of his, his workings? And wow, we need Pentecost. We need a fresh touch of the Lord. Lord, bring all of that back, because when we have the work of the Spirit, those things, those signs, those wonders, those things are going to be evident in the church.
They will flow naturally.
And yes, natural is the key. And perhaps we help the pastor today have a good sermon on Pentecost Sunday. Just preach the isms. But it's just great to sit down and pull on this great wealth of knowledge and understanding you have. And we love and appreciate you. And as for Westmore, the church that I pastor, we're looking forward to Pentecost Sunday. We love this time of year. And we even approached what we've always called Easter. We took a bigger look this year and called it the Holy Week. And next year, I think we're going to even expand on that more. We're going to celebrate the Ascension. We're going to celebrate Pentecost. We're going to celebrate all that leading up to the great outpouring of the Spirit. And we're looking forward to Pentecost this year. But thank you for listening, and God bless you.